So over the past week, now that the road is finally opened all the way through between Sydney and Melbourne on the Coastal Drive, we've actually done the drive, done quite a lot of filming and spoken to quite a few tourism operators as well, just so we can check out the impact as we go along. And for this live stream, I also have a co-host. I'd like to welcome Amanda. How are you, Amanda?
Hi, I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
And you're from Sapphire Coast Tourism.
That's correct.
And so you're located your office is in Merimbula, which is just south of Merimbula.
Yes.
But tell us a bit about Sapphire Coast. Where does it cover?
The Sapphire Coast runs from Bermagui in the north all the way down to Eden in the south. Our coastal towns encompass Bermagui, Tathra, Merimbula, Merimbula and Eden. And we've also got some inland towns as well that your viewers might be aware of. Bega, our heartland and the home of Bega cheese, Cobargo, Candelo and a few more little ones along the way.
Okay. Now, there's been 3 areas of Australia that have been very heavily impacted by our bushfires this summer since Christmas. I'm not talking about the earlier ones in northern New South Wales. But since Christmas, it's really been South Coast New South Wales, East Gippsland and Kangaroo Island, and also the Adelaide Hills. What's it been like here in the Bega Valley over the last 6 to 8 weeks?
Look, it's been difficult for the locals and the people that live here. We had to ask our tourists to leave in the beginning of January. January is generally our biggest time of year for tourists, so that was difficult for the people that live and work here. But we're getting on top of it now. The month was pretty busy with the bushfires, pretty scary, but we are looking forward to moving on. This rain has certainly helped us to become a lot more confident.
Hasn't the rain been wonderful?
Yes, the rain's magnificent. We love it.
Yeah, we actually came up through East Gippsland and into the Bega Valley on, I think it was Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday morning when we came through. And basically when we left Lakes Entrance in Victoria all the way through, it was continually raining. And today, just looking out behind me, there's been several times we've just seen the rain fall. And it's good rain. It's not that massive, heavy downpour that, washes everything away.
Yeah, it's nice, steady rain, wets the ground down. The birds are all back out again. I've driven through the localities and the birds are out. The wetlands are filling up again. The trees are green. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is lovely. We can hear the bellbirds in the background as well. It's just such a magnificent sound and quite synonymous with the South Coast. Okay, let's have a look at our map now. So we're going to basically cover the drive between Sydney and Melbourne. So in terms of affected areas and unaffected areas, if you're coming from the Melbourne direction, whether you go via the towns of Warragul, Walhalla and Traralgon, or whether you go down through Phillip Island, down into Wilson's Promontory and up via Yarram, you don't see any fire impact whatsoever until you get to Orbost. But once you go between Orbost and Cann River, that's when you start to see some fire impact from the Victorian side. Now, there are places where you can actually drive off the road and you will see some fire impact. For example, Bairnsdale, if you turn off onto the Great Alpine Road, you will see fire impact in that area. But otherwise, you don't see any fire impact whatsoever until you pass Orbost. Once you pass Orbost, it's a bit scattered. There's some areas that are fire affected and some that are not. When you get into regions like Gypsy Point and Malakuta, they were very heavily affected, and that fire crossed the border heading up towards Eden. When we got about 4 kilometres out of Eden, we passed the last of the fire area, and then from Eden all the way up to Narooma following the coast road. This is via Merimbula, Merimbula and Tathra. Again, we did not see any fire impact whatsoever. But further north, between Mogo and Bateman's Bay was very heavily affected. Also, north of Bateman's Bay was affected by fires before Christmas. And the region to the north of Ulladulla, between Ulladulla and Jervis Bay, also had some fire impact. Now, on that drive I mentioned going up following the coast between Tathra and Merimbula, if you take the Princess Highway, which continues up through Bega and Cobargo, that area around Cobargo was another one that was heavily affected. So we're going to go into those different regions as we have a look in those areas and show a little bit more on that. It's probably important to acknowledge that there has been a lot lost. Wildlife have been affected. There's been a lot of houses, unfortunately, that have been lost. And also we've been unfortunate to lose some lives as well. They have been a very devastating season. But the primary reason we're doing this live stream is just to put things into a little bit of balance. Usually the media will find a particular scene or a particular shot and play it over and over again. And I'm based on Phillip Island and Victoria, and I didn't expect Cobargo or Mogo to be there at all. I expected absolutely nothing left just from what I've seen on the media, but nothing could be further from the truth, and we'll go into that in more detail. Now, we were talking about the fire-impacted regions along the drive, but there's different kinds of fires. So just that we understand that, let's have a look at a video we shot the other day in the Croajingolong National Park on the various types of fires. Now, there's actually 3 types of bushfire. You have the ground fire, where it's mainly the moss and the peat within the ground smouldering away. Then you have a surface fire, where it breaks the ground and can affect smaller trees and ferns, like this one here was not so lucky in a surface fire. And it can also burn around the trunks of the trees as well and blacken them. But usually the top of the trees is fine. For the fire to get up that high, that's called a crown fire. You have low and high intensity fires. So a high intensity crown fire is when the flames go right to the top of the tree and pretty much destroy the whole thing. But in this case, what we're looking at, even though it's fairly black, is a surface fire. Because as you can see, looking up at the top of the trees, they're still green, lush and beautiful, but the fire's only gone through the surface. Now, there are times we don't complain about the rain in Australia, and at the moment, it's one of those times. Beautiful soaking rain. But we can see here on the road about 25, 30 k's from Cairn River, why it was closed for so long. Because all of these big trees by the roadside, danger of falling, have been pushed right back into the forest, making it a much safer drive. I'm standing here beside what was a high intensity crown fire. There's no leaves at all on the top of the trees. It's been some 6 weeks since the fire went through here, and look at the trees. You've got the black, but it's kind of beautiful with all of that regeneration of green growth coming out. And with this lovely rain we continue to experience, it's not going to be too long until you see more green than black as you drive along this part of the Sydney Melbourne Coastal Drive. So that particular area there was in Croajingolong, and now we're looking at the Merimbula National Park. And some of these are just amazing. I mean, you've got the black burnt bark, but the life of the tree inside just busting to get out. It's not a field of matchsticks, as you quite often see in the media. There are some areas where a low to medium intensity surface fire has gone through, which affects the ground level and the base of the trees, as I just said in the video. But the canopies of the trees, in most cases, are still lush green and beautiful. Or the leaves might have browned off from the fire, but the green leaves will come back in no time at all. It's amazing when we look at the regrowth, and we will look at that a little bit later on. So what is it like to actually drive through some of these regions? Well, I'm glad you asked. We've got another video on that one as well. So if we just have a look now as we drive through, this particular area is south of Jervis Bay. We're heading down towards Ulladulla, and it's completely unaffected. Then you come into a fire region, and this is what it's looking at. So here we've got a medium intensity ground fire. The leaves have browned off on the top of the trees, but they're still there. If it was a high intensity crown fire, there wouldn't be any leaves left at all. And then we turn around a corner and we can see there straight up ahead, you come out of that fire zone again and everything's back to green, normal and absolutely beautiful. So when you're doing the drive, it's certainly not going to be all black. There's going to be parts of the drive that are fire impacted like we're looking at now. There's some damage there to some road signs as well from the heat. And then there's other parts of the drive like this one here. We're coming into the town of Ulladulla. And you would never know there was fires in regions nearby. Coming into the town itself, the majority of towns were not heavily impacted at all. For example, Ulladulla is the same as it always is, thriving, doing really well, beautiful beaches off the side, great accommodation, great food and wine. And if you're a fan of Rick Stein, he's got a restaurant there at Mollymook as well. So there's some great things you can do. We've jumped over the border now into Victoria. And as I mentioned, when we drove across from Lakes Entrance, it pretty much rained all the way. Now, this is before we get to Cairn River. And in between Orbost and Cairn River, 1 minute it's lush and green and lovely. And the next minute we're seeing areas that were more impacted by the fires. So this is the area that's just near Cairn River. And as you can see here, some of the areas, the intensity of the fire and the height of the fire was quite high. Like this one here on the right would have been a high intensity crown fire going through there. It really depends on the weather and the speed. Now this road here is a bit smaller. It's off the main road and it's heading into the town of Malakuta, one of the areas that was very heavily affected. And you can see there on the hill in the distance, again, those trees don't have many leaves on top. So a very high intensity fire on New Year's Eve was was the one that went through. But once we got into Malakuta, other than enjoying the rain, the main township and many, many houses still exist. Yes, there were a lot lost, unfortunately, but not the whole town. So the shops are open and trading, and absolutely delighted to have the road open again so people can actually get in there and enjoy the shops. Cross the border back into New South Wales. We're coming into the town of Eden now. And like I said, 4 kilometres before we got to Eden. Peter, have you and Steve had any opportunity to explore the area at all and sort of see damage around the area yourself? And just double check that microphone's on. Yeah.
We travel to, we've been up to Sydney a couple of times since, one time up the coast and back down on the, through Canberra and Cooma, just to see the damage that was done. It's just amazing that, Cobargo, as you said, was hit pretty bad, and Mogo, but they're still so resilient.
So even the news you were getting here in Bega Valley, I know the local council, the local fire brigade and whatever, their communications were just excellent.
I mean, they definitely were.
The Bega Valley Shire were doing live stream Facebook updates from community halls and whatever, and really keeping people up to date.
Yep.
And I got more accurate information I did from that than turning on the nightly news. It got to the stage where I didn't bother turning on the nightly news because I wanted to know the real story and the whole story, not just those bits that, put on the front page of the daily papers.
Yeah. No, you're right. We were under the impression that it was actually worse than, it was still bad seeing some of the houses through the bush that had gone, but we did expect more.
We went to Cobargo and had a look ourselves, and of course, as we do, we made a little video there too. Now, even where I live over on Phillip Island, the news that I was getting through sort of indicated this town was completely wiped out. But again, nothing can be further from the truth. It was interesting when we went through Cobargo. I mean, there was not a lot of car parks in the main street. We had to drive down a bit before we could find one. So we can see here on this shot where the video's just stopped, there's a lot of shops that are still operating in Cobargo town. This particular shot here shows an area where there are about 3 businesses that unfortunately didn't get through the fires. And on the opposite side of the road, it's exactly the same situation. But when we saw media reports, they positioned themselves where that whole background behind them was nothing but burnt out. And unfortunately, that's what we see on our media screens often time and time again. And they talk about a big fire came through and it's wiped out Cobargo town. And that's what gave me the impression that the town was gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing left.
Yeah.
So goodness knows what our international friends overseas are thinking when they're only getting an abbreviated version of that on their media. Cobargo is alive. Cobargo is trading. And Cobargo is beautiful. It really is a beautiful town.
It is. It's a nice
and now more than
village.
Ever. Yeah, that's right. Now more than ever, they need people back there. Now, Mogo's the same. We took some photos when we were at Mogo. And here's another classic shot that you see in the media. So there was 3 or 4 craft shops along here that unfortunately the fire got the best of. And when one went up, the rest of them pretty much followed. But then when you look at some of the other shots around the area, there's still plenty of buildings that are going and plenty of shops as well. On the other side of the road, on both sides of the road at this point, plenty of shops along there just trading as normal. Yeah. So it's great to see there's still so much, business well and alive in the town of Mogo. And that Mogo fire, after it went through Mogo, it basically went out to Browley, and there was a last-minute wind change which saved the Brownlee township. Yeah. But unfortunately, one of our Sydney Melbourne touring partners lost their home and their office and their Airstream. They call it Bambino at the Bower. Yeah. And they don't think they'll be open for 6 possibly 9 months. So it shows how big that fire was that went through. Then it went right across the Mogo Zoo as well. So you sort of think, all of these animals in enclosures and different areas within the zoo. What hope have they got? Well, that's a good news story, and we'll be coming back to that one a little bit later on. So, Peter, tell me a bit about Sapphire Waters Motor Inn.
We're a 29-room motel. We're based just on your way into town, which is it is just a short walk to the main CBD and the restaurants and clubs. We have different style and different types of rooms to cater for all different occasions. and guests.
I'm really
do it
impressed with the
different.
refurb. Every time I go there, I see another few more rooms that have been. I mean, the showers are just beautiful in those refurbished rooms.
Yeah, they're good rainforest showers.
Yeah, they're
Yes.
lovely.
Yes.
And the beds are just so fluffy, cozy, and comfortable, and the linen and the quality of all the stuff. You've obviously started with what was a basic motel and really just lifted the game. And Anthony and I have stayed there many times. We've had great family trips that have stayed there as well. And I think if I can say one of the greatest assets of Sapphire Waters Motor Inn is you and Steve and your knowledge of the area. I mean, once when Lorraine and I were there, I remember Steve saying, "Oh, have you been to this part in this national park? And have you seen that?" I learnt more in half a day with Steve than I've learned in 9 years of Sydney Melbourne touring. Some of these great little getaways and so forth. So you must get out yourself and explore.
We do
the
like
region.
to explore a bit. Yeah. Do some little walks and find these little beaches that are tucked away.
Well, not only have we got to speak with Peter, we'll be speaking with other people soon, like Captain Sponge, and more on that shortly. But as we did the drive, we wanted to talk to as many of our tourism partners as possible. Sorry about that; my mind wandered, my tongue followed it. So let's play that video now and just see the impact on some of our local tourism operators.
What was different about these fires is that we had a number of fires going over a long period, stretched out across the east coast of Victoria, New South Wales, and then into South Australia. So because they all happened in different areas at the same time, it looked like the whole southeast of the country was on fire, and that's not true. It was a great line. It looked good in the media, but it just wasn't true.
As you can see, the place is still untouched. It's still beautiful. You wouldn't even know we've had fires around here. I'm very, very lucky, but we just need people to come back again. Yeah.
It was really the goodwill. It was people willing to drive the extra hours coming down that sort of kept us ticking over, and people taking that extra effort to make sure that they supported our community as well, that kept us going. But we did close for about 17 days in that time.
We've been impacted a lot, unfortunately. We haven't been able to fly since about the middle of December last year. It's been mainly smoke, which has impacted the visibility, which is a great shame. But at the same time, that will clear. And we're fortunate that we've been lucky to gear up and get some stuff done and be in a good spot to fly people again as soon as the smoke clears up and we can get out there.
So the town itself wasn't directly hit at all. We could certainly see the glow. If you can see behind us, just over the hills, it was a very bright orange and red glow. So we knew they were close. Brethren was surrounded by fire, so some pretty close towns to us were hit. But Benzel itself was very lucky and very much supported by crews as well. So we all felt very safe in Benzel.
Paperback Camp has been here for 20 years. I think when Mum and Dad bought the property, they actually looked at the trees here to see if there had actually been any fire scarring. And there was none. So they thought it was actually a good property to build on. And thus far, that's proven true. We've been, in the 20 odd years that we've been here, we've been closely brushed with maybe 2 or 3 fires in that time.
We originally got our advice to evacuate our guests on the 28th of December. We were fully booked, so we had to assist both domestic and international guests for ways to leave while it was still safe to do so. That's only the second time since we opened the cottages in 2005 that we've been in a position that we've had to do that. But we're well versed and we're also well set up by the Incident Control Centre with what to do and how to assist people.
No, they were completely understanding. They knew why they had to leave. I mean, especially with the news and stuff like that, of what was going to happen on the 4th. So they were very understanding. They had plenty of time to pack up and go. It's not like leave now, the fire's going to be here in 30 minutes. So we had a lot of time to get them prepped and out of here, and everything shut down before the fires actually came through.
But we got through it, and really it's now just about bouncing back from that. We had some guests that were in-house at the time that actually evacuated and then came back because they were having such a great time. So as soon as it was safe to do so, they resumed their stay, which was wonderful.
The community really pulled together to defend Gypsy Point as a whole. Malakuta, there's a very big community spirit there too.
the fire shed just became a hub of activity of people dropping in food, dropping in lovely baked goods, checking in to see what they could do to help the team. And so Tanja definitely came alive as a community of support and people just communicating together about what their intentions are, just supporting the fire crew, basically knowing what an awesome job they were doing.
So we sort of know each other a bit better now, and I think we had a community barbecue on the foreshore just a couple of days ago, Paul. I've never seen so many people at that barbecue, and I think that's a direct result of people really want to connect and they want to know their neighbour and they want to look after their neighbour and they want to know that we've got each other's backs if it were to ever happen again.
And the community really got together to prep the village because in the brigade we told them they had to do a lot more cleaning up and get those gutters cleaned of leaves and tidy up their gardens and all those sort of simple jobs. And the community got right in and did all that and helped each other and really worked really well together.
I think too, for me, there was such a sense of support and concern for one another. We're a tiny little village, 2 tiny little villages, and we know each other so well. It's like being in a lovely family. And wherever you went, people were looking out for you, had a real sense of a great community resilience, a great sense of caring and support for one another, which is pretty special.
Well, very lucky. We got a wind change at the right moment. We also have a number of natural fire breaks or semi-natural fire breaks around the area. We also have a small slip-on truck with a small pump, and the property here itself has fire protection as well with pumps and dams. And the town was very much aware, as we are every season, that we need to be prepared for fire. We live in an Australian bush with thousands of hectares of national park on our doorstep. So we're always very conscious of fires and we prepare very well for them.
Nor'easterly prevailed and we've just been so lucky and we're so grateful. Really, Tilba has remained unaffected. The Bryn at Tilba, as you can see, is still standing. We're ready to get moving again and we just need to take a bit of iron off windows. And
I decided to stay here just to make sure that the assets for Discovery were protected because it's my park, so I didn't want to see it go up if I could help it. Not that I could probably done a lot, but at least in my mind that I did all I could do. But luckily the fireys were here with their trucks in order to keep it back. And that way, because if they didn't, the park would have been gone. And they said that straight up. If they weren't here, the park would have been gone.
The community pulled together pretty well. There was only the visitors that were evacuated from Tathra, and I think there were concerns about road access and what would be happening. Most of the locals did stay, and pretty well all of the visitors did depart. But we had road closure issues to the north, west and south. But all the roads are now open again.
And we've got to be really conscious that the media loves flames. You know, the old line, if it bleeds, it leads, it goes onto the front pages. And quite often when you watch media reports, they'll show the same footage over and over and over again because they've picked out the worst bit of footage that they can put on, and that's actually not the reality.
Michael Leaney there from Walhalla Star Hotel, finishing off our little chat there to the operators. And he's dead right what he says, you know, when the media are focusing on some of this imagery and you just see it played over and over and over again. And then we see footage that's coming out of CNN or ABC or the BBC or whatever, and it's that same footage over and over again. And look, yes, has been horrific. There has been some horrible parts of it, but it just does not represent the full situation. To talk a little bit more about it, we've got another one of the legends of the local tourism business, known as Captain Sponge from Captain Sponge Magical Oyster Tours. How are you, Sponge?
I'm well, Paul. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Just double check you've turned that microphone on. You have, it's green.
We're good to go.
You and Peter are so good. Just, you know, you're professional at this, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, now you're an oyster farmer.
I am.
You've been an oyster farmer pretty much all your life. But
a primary producer all my life at least. But yeah, oyster farm for the last 10 or 12 years.
10 or 12 years. And of course, you've combined that with the tours and taking people out, experiencing it. We've done quite a few meals on the boat as well, and they're always very popular. How are the oysters? What sort of impact have you had through, through this horrible season we've had the last 5 or 6 weeks?
Mate, look, I reckon the oysters themselves, as far as I can tell at least, are fine. There's been a lot of ash. I was talking to you earlier about ash that kind of got washed into the ocean, or blew into the ocean really, which ended up in particular Merimbula Lake, which is one of the lakes that I farm in. So there's a lot of ash kind of around the oyster infrastructure and that kind of thing. But the oysters seem to be okay, and they're certainly at this time of year they're particularly fat and they're getting ready to breed and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't seem to be interfering with them too much at this stage. With the beautiful rain that we've been getting, it looks like that ash is kind of clearing. We've been getting big tides, which is clearing the lakes up and that kind of thing, and I reckon it's hopefully business as usual, mate.
So when you're getting that sort of rain that we've been witnessing for most of today here, just that light, steady soaking rain, it's much better than the heavy downpours, and it actually filters a lot of nutrients into the water, which the oysters absolutely love, don't they?
Yeah. So once that nutrient gets into the water, the nutrient kind of feeds the algae, and the algae is what feeds the oysters. So you get a definite response from rainfall, even in that kind of marine or estuarine environment. So, mate, the oysters love them. We haven't seen good rain for quite some time, so it's more than welcome.
Yeah, we certainly welcome it in more ways than one. Well, it's great to hear that all of that's going really well. I guess on the tourism side, things have been pretty quiet the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, mate, you could say that. Look, I get the odd tour here and there from the people who have been, game enough to come out, I guess. But, it's really, we're open for business. We're ready to go. The fires are gone. We've had some lovely rain. And like you were saying, the country's bouncing back. You wouldn't know, apart from some of the devastation in some areas, obviously, that there'd been a fire through in some places. We've got, green grass and trees coming back. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, it certainly is. I guess one of the other things that's great to talk about is the good news stories with our wildlife. Now, again, we've seen some absolutely horrible images in our media, but for every horrible image I've seen, there's been another 10 great stories. There's vets from the Hillsville Sanctuary in Victoria and Zoos Victoria on a plane and airlifted into Malakuta and set up a triage for koalas, and the work they're doing, and the koalas that they've already returned, back to the wild, the trees that are shooting, the kangaroos and the wombats and so forth getting around. It's just fabulous. Yeah. But there's 2 stories in particular, and one of those is from Loz from Tangier Lagoon Camp, who we saw earlier. Loz is one of those wildlife carers. If there's an injured animal on the side of the road or whatever, Loz will take them, nurse them back in full rehabilitation, and then release them back into the wild. She's got kangaroos all over the property there at Tangier Lagoon. And another story that we probably haven't highlighted enough, although he did make some international media, is Chad Staples from Mogo Zoo. Now, we mentioned before, Mogo was one of the areas that got hit really hard. Unfortunately, one of our partners there, the bower at Browlee, was hit fairly hard, and some of the bowers got significantly damaged. And the owners also, unfortunately, lost their house and their office. So that's one of our partners who won't be open for 6, possibly 9 months until they can get all of that cleaned up. That shows you the sort of ferocity of a fire. Or intensity, I should say, to use the correct terminology, that went right through Mogo Zoo, yet not one single animal in that fire perished. Let's have a look at their stories now.
There's a strong sense of having saved the koala habitat, because the New South Wales koala remnant population of wild koalas is very small and very struggling for habitat. And the figures coming out of what is potentially gone, not really sure, they're all just guesswork right now. But the remnant population here, their habitat's intact, which is fabulous.
The Mogo Wildlife Park has an amazing team, and that's why we're still standing. When everyone else was told to evacuate from the town, the zookeepers turned up here and helped fight the fires to keep it safe for the day. So from 6 a.m. in the morning, we were putting water onto every square inch of the park. For that real central part of that day when it got really crazy, we were fighting fires on every square inch of the place. And then finally, when that southerly changed in the evening, we felt like we got on top of it for the most part. And then we put out spot fires for, I think, about the next 4 or 5 days.
but to provide food for the population that's here now so that it can feed up and breed up to then replace what's been lost in burnt out forests. So there was a lot of question initially about should we be feeding the wildlife, but it was an absolute overwhelming yes. Let's feed them the appropriate food, especially access to water, and then they're not going to rely on it because it's such a short time. And if you take certain processes into account of how to put the food out, you can avoid disease sharing and other things as much as possible. So yeah, there's a really strong, and it's still happening, group of locals who are going out there on a daily basis or checking food stations every 2 or 3 days, making sure that either burnt out forests have some access to water or intact forests have a good breeding population of animals here still.
Yeah, to protect the animals, it really depended on the species. There were sort of, I guess, different categories. So there were certainly animals we were just able to essentially leave where they were. Where they were was safe. We then had some smaller animals like primates, like the marmosets and tamarins, and even the red pandas where they were was not safe. So they got packed into travel containers and they came up to my house, which is on site. We had the big dangerous sorts of animals like the lions, tigers, gorillas, orangutans that were all moved into their night dens, given plenty of food, plenty of water, and then kept separate from what was going on. And then the really big stuff like the giraffe and the rhino and the zebra were given access to every single paddock that we have along our boundary, which meant that they could then put themselves where they felt most safe in proximity to the fire.
What an amazing story there, Sponge, isn't it? I just think it's incredible how, so many people come together. I mean, you've got the amazing work of the fireys, in every state. You got fireys from all over the world flying in to, give some of our guys and girls a rest on the fire front. But then you've got these wildlife volunteers who, just spend their time going out looking after and protecting, the wildlife and rehabilitating and so forth. There's some pretty awesome people.
There is some very special people around the place, mate, isn't there? And they're very selfless human beings to be able to, to give themselves so freely like that. And you hear about fireys who are off saving someone else's house while their own house got burnt. That's a very selfless act, that's for sure.
So the area that we're in today, and look, it's probably a bit hard to see in the bow. No, we can still see the trees behind us. It's just so beautiful, lush and green. The Sapphire Coast is really like, one of the many jewels in the Sydney Melbourne touring crown. There's some great things you can do here. We might roll a video and have a chat about it, Sponge.
Yeah, sure, mate.
Some of those great things that you can do. So why do you like living in this area so much?
Mate, it's just got so much natural beauty. Which is, very much untouched. And you can go to a beach and pretty much be the only person there a lot of the time, if you know where to go, of course. We grow the best oysters on the planet.
Of course.
So, I say that without any bias whatsoever. So, that helps. And I'm an oyster farmer, so I want to be growing good products. So, and because we don't have masses of people, we don't have massive population, we don't have a lot of agriculture and industry and that kind of thing in our catchments, we can grow really good product and grow it really cleanly.
There's just so many beautiful parts, and whether it's the oysters, whether it's the luxury camping, whether it's the getting close and personal with the wildlife, the rainforests, all of this area around the southern part of New South Wales and the eastern part of Victoria. It continues right through the beautiful Crowajeegalong National Park, up to Walhalla, down to Wilson's Promontory, one of the wildlife capitals of the world, Phillip Island. There's just experience after experience after experience right along the whole drive, and we're so pleased that, so much of it's in really good health. And, as we keep saying, it's open for business. So I guess what we should do is just do a bit of a recap, because I'm just keeping an eye on the time. And I said we'd try and keep this to 45 minutes, which means we've got 2 minutes to go.
Right, okay, that's plenty.
We might go over that. The total roads that are affected is about 18% of the entire drive, which means 82% of the drive's not affected. The main road is open all the way through now between Sydney and Melbourne on the Coastal Drive. And, of course, we've got our fantastic Heritage Drive, so we look forward to doing some live streams on our inland route at a future date. But there are some roads that are still closed, like the road to Pebbly Beach, the Mount Agony Road, which is on the Bateman's Bay side of Pebbly Beach, is still closed. And there's some roads closed in Victoria around Cape Conran and Marlow. You can get to Marlow, but you can't get to there via the Cape Conran side. So they're still working on some fires in those areas. And I'm hoping this rain keeps moving in that direction, because that's about 3 hours from where we're sitting at the moment. Inc has asked us about some apps. Well, Inc, I'm so glad you asked, because we're going to go to that right now. When you're traveling around Australia, whether you're local or whether you're visiting, there's some really good apps that I'd like to bring to your attention. And these are apps that are produced and run by state government agencies. So if you want to know really what's going on, not the hype you see in the media, this is a really good way to do it. Let's start with the Victorian one. It's called emergency.vic.gov.au. They do have an app you can download to your phone. And this one pretty much covers any sort of emergency throughout the state of Victoria. So if you zoom in, you start to see a bit of an area where the fires went, and an awful lot of that is National Park. And just because it's shaded dark doesn't mean it's all burnt. It's sort of the area that the path of the fires went through. And you can see that one there in the corner that hit Malakuta just before it got into town. There was a wind change, and then it threatened Eden as it blew up over the border into New South Wales. With all those little icons there, if you click on any of the icons, it then gives you more information about what's going on. So you can click the more info button and get all sorts of details on that. So that's on the Victorian side. Let's look at the New South Wales equivalent. This is put out by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. And again, we have a map showing those hotspots. And when you zoom in, there's no sort of red markers there at all, because all of these fires now are considered to be safe. Or under control at the present time. Of course, in the drier areas that haven't got the rain, a major wind change and a hot day can pick that up. We're still in the middle of February, but it's just so good now that they've really scaled back. If you zoom in on this map, I just remind you again that it is state-based. You don't want to think that the fires just conveniently stop there on a nice dead straight line. That's where the New South Wales component stops. And you need to go to the Victorian one, as we said before, to see that same sort of area where it carries over. Whereas on the Victorian side, I guess they've at least showed where the fire that started in Victoria crossed the border into New South Wales. But all of the states and territories have similar apps. And Sponge, you're aware of the live traffic roadside from New South Wales?
I am, mate. Yes,
well,
I
we'll
use
click
it from
on that
time
one,
to time.
And you can tell us all about that.
Oh, geez, don't put me on the spot,
I'm
mate.
going to have arrested and drink.
Basically, Live Traffic New South Wales will tell you where the roads are blocked, or there's been accidents which are blocking roads or slowing traffic and that kind of thing. So it's really an hour by hour update on the where you can and can't go, really. So look, if there's any doubt, or if there is a road closed because of a fire, for example, or an accident or whatever, or you can see there, I think there's roadworks and what have you as well.
Yep.
Then you can see all those on that app. So it is pretty handy. And has been used a fair bit of late, mate, with with those fires. I can tell
They're
you.
all downloaded on my phone. I've been watching those apps like a hawk. Then on the Victorian side for the road closures, you've got the Vic Roads Traffic, or traffic.vicroads.gov.au. Similar thing where it's showing the roads that are closed and so forth, or the roads that have warnings on them, the roadworks and all of those sorts of things. And same sort of story. You click on those areas and it brings up more information about what's going on in that particular area. And it's so nice to see that road, that Sydney Melbourne Coastal Drive, going all the way through without a big red line over the top of it. Sponge, thanks very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the show.
Yeah, no worries.
And Peter, who's sitting out there in the peanut gallery at the moment, watching the live stream on the monitor inside. I guess we just have a little closing video to finish off with. I'll just make sure no one else has made a comment here. No, not recently. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's enlightened you a little bit just on what the real situation is along the Sydney Melbourne Coastal Drive. And as we go into the video, I guess the last thing I can say is that we are open for business. Thanks for watching. I'm looking at the wrong camera.